Well, I was adopted, but my mom and dad, the one who raised me, the ones who adopted me, they passed away in a terrible car accident, and now I'm left with nobody. My siblings don't look at me like a true sibling, they call me the fake one. And then the entire mountain of inheritance battle began. They don't think I deserve anything because I'm not biologically related. Well, I got some news for you. I'm not going down without a fight.
Do you ever wonder what life would be like if you weren't born into your current family? I do. It's hard not when your family is bent on making life a living hell for you. I don't think I want to introduce myself or anything like that here, but I'm choosing to rant here because my siblings have isolated me from the real world. I don't have any friends, nor do I have any family that would support me when things are hard. My family's the one who's making life incredibly difficult for me. Let me tell you guys about my life. So, I was adopted by my parents when I was barely a few months old. We don't have any pictures of me during the adoption process or anything, but I know them as my parents from the time I can remember anything. My parents love me a lot, and if it were in their hands, they'd give me an amazing life. Unfortunately, I have 3 other siblings who refuse to accept the fact that I'm part of the family as well. For them, I'm an outsider who does not deserve to be treated like family because I don't share the same blood as them. You see, all my life they've treated me like garbage. The only thing that was keeping me sane enough to survive the dynamic of the family was the fact that my parents pampered me a lot even though I was the middle child. They never made me feel like I wasn't part of the family or that I was different from my siblings just because I did not share the same DNA as them. Mom and Dad made sure to celebrate every single achievement of mine, and they did it with such grace and elegance that nobody could refuse. A lot of the time, even our external family would try to keep me out of family talks because they did not think that I knew the background or something. It hurt a lot to be treated this way, but I knew there was nothing that I could do. My siblings would have been mean to me since I was a kid, and even though one of my sisters is younger than me, she gets more priority within us, 4, than I do. I mean, the other 3 don't even ask me how I'm doing, or how my life is going, or anything like that. Instead, they avoid me like I carry a deadly plague or something. This one time, my parents were out of town for a weekend, so we were living with our grandparents. Since our grandparents were old and tired most of the time, they could not really protect me just to make sure that my siblings didn't treat me badly. When they went to the bed, the 3 would wrap me in a blanket while I was asleep and put me outside on the porch. I was finding out when I woke up shivering due to the cold and realized where I was. Thankfully, they kept the door open, so even though it was late at night, I could still sneak back inside. That morning, when I confronted them about it, they pretended like they didn't know anything about it. It was only when I started getting really aggravated that they told me that they did it as a simple prank, and that I need to calm down so that our grandparents don't find out. Instances like these have been happening all my life. When I was younger, they would gang up against me and force me to do their work. They were still big bullies who have fun making somebody else's life miserable. There was a time when I was so tired of them treating me like crap that I asked them what I did wrong to deserve their treatment. However, their only response was that I got pampered so much by our parents, even though I'm adopted, that somebody had to put me in my place. Since then, I've understood that it's their jealousy talking that makes them act in this nature. I do agree that Mom and Dad pamper me way too much, and it's more than how they pamper my other siblings, but I always thought that it was just because they saw how I was treated like an outcast by my siblings. For me, this was sort of their way to reconcile the family, and to make me feel like somebody in my life actually wanted me. That conversation took a really bad turn when I expressed my opinion on the matter. They could not believe that I told them that they were jealous of me. They didn't take it well, so the week was full of random pranks by all 3 of them. That's how I found out that I need to keep my opinions to myself and not express them to anybody. Things got ugly when I did. The thing that really bothered me about all this was the fact that my parents never took my side. Even when I straight up told them what was happening, they would never discipline the other kids or tell them not to do anything to me. Yeah, once in a while they would glare at them when they were doing something obviously mean in public, but on other days they would just ignore it and call it a regular sibling quarrel. I was really hurt by this fact because I did not want all their extra pampering if it was just going to end up with me being treated like a garbage sack my entire life. Unfortunately, I was stuck being an outsider in my own family. It got too much when I was in high school. Well, they completely just ruined my life, and it's been months since then, and the effects of the pranks are still very visible in my day-to-day. So basically, we're all around the same age, which means that we're close to each other in grades as well. All of us were in high school at the same time, and everyone knew that we four were related. However, it was just the three of them who would hang out all the time and leave me alone. I'm a very big introvert, so I didn't have a lot of friends. Just because I talked too casually in class. There was nothing fun about high school for me, honestly. My siblings made sure that I did not accidentally be associated with them, because that would bring shame for them as a family. Every time that they'd see me sitting alone at lunch or in the hallway, they'd either sneer at me or laugh at me. It was never a look that siblings gave to each other, but I was used to it, so it didn't bother me that much. They were bullies in high school, to put it simple. But they never did it in a way that would make them look like the bad guy. Instead, they just went around telling everybody that I did not fit in the family dynamics, and I was kind of just there to take up space. However, no one in school actually knew that I was adopted. This is because I went to school that had really a few students. So the rumors spread really fast, and on top of that, the students were super judgmental about everything. They had very conservative views and belonged to families who abided by a firm societal structure. I mean, anything that was not normal would be a big deal. It was a very old-fashioned mindset, and I was super tired of it, but I had to accept it. Especially because my own siblings had the same mindset as well. They didn't get tired of reminding me that I did not actually belong with them because I shared different DNA. Anyways, none of it really bothered me as much as I made it show, though my attitude or something, because it was starting to make my siblings mad. They wanted a reaction out of me, and me being nonchalant about the entire thing just ruined the purpose of, quote, bullying me. That's why they came up with something bigger. One day I went to school to find everybody staring at me and whispering to their friends while looking at me. I was confused because even though people did talk about me and my terrible relationship with my siblings, it was never this bad. However, when I went to class and found my seatmate staring at me, I found out that my siblings told everybody that I was adopted. In less than a few hours, the rumor circulated and spread, and everybody knew that I did not share the same DNA as my siblings. That day was probably the hardest day of my high school experience. People started talking about me right to my face, discussing how it made no sense that my siblings treated me so poorly, and that they would react the same way if a outsider came into their family and tried to be equal. Of course, everyone wasn't like this. There were some kids who didn't really care if I was adopted and engaged in conversation with me in the same way they did before this rumor blew over. However, there was a higher percentage of people who did care and weren't too pleased about adoption in general. My classmate in one of my classes asked me if it's true, and it sort of made me lose it. I told them how I've been with my family since I was only a few months old. I basically grew up as part of the family. Just because we don't have the same blood doesn't mean that they're not my family. However, it just backfired when my brother, who was in the same class as me, heard my conversation and assured everybody that there's no way I was part of the family. It was very clear where I stood with them, and the entire school wasn't treating me the best. I spent the entire week running away from the whispers of people in the hall and pointing of fingers only to go home and experience it all over again. At that point, I was so frustrated that I confronted my parents, asked them to contact the adoption agency to either take me back or find my real parents. For some reason, my parents started to panic when I said all of this, and it turned into this big deal. My parents realized how much I was suffering, so they went off on my siblings and started lecturing all of them on their behavior and how they should not be acting this way towards me. But it seemed to make them even angrier. More angry than ever. I saw my siblings turn red as they faced me while Mom was just yelling at the back. I had tears strolling through my face as I tried to control my expressions and not break down really bad right then and there. Well, it still felt like a slap in my face when I did not see an ounce of genuineness in either of my siblings, as my mom tried to make them apologize. I was bent on getting to know my real parents, so I spent a few days trying to sneak into my dad's study to see if there was any files that could lead me to the agency of my parents. However, on my second day of trying to find something, my sister came into the study to see me going through my dad's stuff. Her expression changed from confusion to anger in a second as she realized what I was doing. Honestly, the entire family was still walking on eggshells around each other from the previous fight, and I didn't want to cause another. So when my sister came to drag me out of the study, I retaliated and grabbed her hand to stop her from going anywhere. I tried explaining what I was doing because I wanted to show that I didn't want to stay in the family either if they didn't want me. I thought they'd be happy, but I guess they loved to get me in trouble because she dragged me to my parents' room and told them what I did. The shock and disappointment on their face is a look that I don't think I'll ever forget. All my life, I've tried my hardest to make my parents proud of me and to never give them a reason to be disappointed in my actions. However, I've done it that day. I'm not sure if I regret it or not, because even though I wanted to be a good daughter and not do anything to hurt them intentionally, I still wanted to know about my real parents and what happened to them. Why was I given up for adoption? Why was I brought into this family if all the children didn't like me? And most importantly, why were my parents hiding everything about my real family? It's not making any sense to me at all. It's been a week since that incident, and my parents are still a bit shocked that I would do something like this. It caused a really big fight between us because I wanted to know my real family and my past, and for some reason they kept hiding it from me, which made me want to know about it even more. It's also the fact that my siblings have started to act mean in high school, even meaner than before. I even had more of a loner in school now, and the gossiping and whispering's just making me mad. It died down a lot compared to the week when I was exposed. Even then, every time I tried to do something in school, people used the fact that I'm adopted as a diss or a comeback, and this one time I accidentally bumped into a guy and made him crack his phone screen just a tiny bit, so small that you couldn't even see it until this was pointed out, yet he still used the "this is why your family left you" as a diss. I don't think people understand how bad these words hurt or how they affect a person. If I felt like an outsider in the family before, it's worse now because now I don't just feel like an outsider to my family, I feel like an outsider to everyone in school as well. It's the thought that everyone knows I'm not biologically a part of the family, and 3/5 people in the family don't even want me there. It's embarrassing and it makes me feel really bad about myself. My parents have tried to calm me down and comfort me by explaining that I feel like a missing piece of the family that came into their lives right there at the perfect time, but I don't know if I believe them. I don't know if I believe anything anymore. Update number 1. Hey guys. It's been a few months since the incident happened. Things were a bit rough for the first month, but it got better after. Everyone in my family forgot what I was about to do, and I agreed to never do it again. I realized that I needed to let go of my past and not let it dictate me. There was a reason that my parents must have abandoned me. I should be grateful that my current parents decided to adopt me and give me a good life. My siblings were still the same, but now my parents were a bit hesitant towards saying anything related to adoption as well. I guess they didn't want to trigger any other episode where I tried to find my real family or whatever, even though I tried to reassure them a lot that I would not do anything like that. They didn't seem to be so sure of it. However, a month ago, my life changed completely. The only people who supported me and treated me like actual human beings, my parents were gone. They were never coming back, and since then my life has been going downhill. We were all in school when we got a call by the principal to go to his office. It was a bit shocking to be called all together, but we didn't expect to hear that our parents passed away in a car crash. Our world shattered when we heard that, and the entire office was full of our cries and wails as we tried making sense of what happened. Even when the teacher was trying to convince us to calm down, it wouldn't work. Our parents were the greatest source of inspiration and happiness for all of us. It wasn't easy to hear that we would never hear their voices again, or that we wouldn't be supported by them verbally in the decisions that we make in the future. For me, it was worse. My parents were the only real family I had. There was no one to support me now but my siblings. They had each other to get through this tough time, and they had each other to rely on. I didn't. Instead, they made sure I felt isolated. Every time they saw me cry, they would remind me that I was crying over fake parents, not real ones. It made me angry, so all of us just kept fighting all the time. Well, things took a turn when my siblings decided to kick me out of the family business. You see, our parents had a good business going, but they did not get the chance to write a will because their death was so sudden. Legally, the business went to their children, but my siblings decided to kick me out of it and tell me I had no place there. I was devastated because I knew that I could do well there. I knew I was meant to take over, and Dad and I talked about it so much as well. It was incredibly selfish of them to keep it to themselves because our parents considered me part of the family just as much as they considered my siblings part of the family. Of course, like always, this caused fights as well. My siblings weren't ready to accept the fact that Dad was looking forward to handling, the business to me, and told me to bug off from the family forever. Now that Mom and Dad weren't here, they had no obligation to keep me and the family apart from the fact that I could legally stay in the house with them. As a formality, I would be part of the family, but in other cases, I was an orphan again. I had no family, yet again. Update number 2. Hey guys, long time no see. It's been around 3 years since my parents passed away. Life has not exactly been easy for me. I previously mentioned how I was only part of the family on papers after their death, right? Well, my siblings did not hesitate to remind me about it every breathing second and every passing hour. Anytime they'd be doing something as a family, I'd be on my own, or most of the time I would not even be invited. Now, in my last year of university, and away from my siblings, I got out of that house as soon as possible, because I didn't want to constantly hear about how I was living in a house that wasn't mine, or forcing myself to be a part of a family I didn't belong to. It was getting tiring listening to all that, so I worked really hard on my college applications, and I got accepted to a university far away from my siblings. Ever since I moved, I haven't talked to either of my siblings properly, and they haven't made the efforts to talk to me either. The only conversations we had were the basic things that siblings needed to have to make sure the other was alive. Even if we hated each other, I guess they wanted to make sure I did not end up like my parents. Also, the fact that part of the inheritance money went to me, and most of the time they tried convincing me to give it to them. All these years, I sat back and watched them spend all their inheritance money like it was water. They had no care about how valuable money was, and because they were all handling the business together, whatever money they generated from there, they'd use it to pay for their expenses and spend the rest of them on luxuries that they could just live without. I didn't see the need to waste so much money on stupid things as much as they did, but hey, I didn't want to interfere. I got a job on my own, and along with my inheritance, I'm making enough money to take care of my rent and expenses. However, this year, I found out that they were basically spending the money on parties, drugs, and gambling. Things like these weren't only ruining their life, but also my parents' hard-earned money. I knew Mom and Dad would have never wished to see their kids end up like this, and because of that, I decided to text my siblings and tell them that they need to get their act together. I know I had no business doing that because we weren't close or even siblings at this point, but I did not want my parents' money to be wasted. However, they told me to stay out of the family dynamics and issues and mind my own damn business. Not just that, they also said some really mean stuff to me about being adopted that took me back to how they treated me when we were kids. Thinking about everything they've put me through, and also being influenced by so much media content I consume these days about the adoption process and finding real families, I decided to track my luck once again. When my parents passed away and my siblings treated me like crap, I went into my dad's study again, and I found a file about an adoption center. It didn't say my name or anything like that, but considering I was the one adopted, that must be mine. After an exhausting conversation with my siblings, I decided to go to the adoption center to get more information about my past and why I was abandoned by my biological family. However, once I got there and asked for my information, I found that I wasn't in their records. My parents never adopted me from this place. If not, then why did they have that file in their study? I'm confused right now, but I'm going to continue looking in hopes that someday I find my real family. Update number 3. Buckle up. Hey guys, it's been another year. I finished college and I got my degree, and now I have a good, reputable job that pays me well. However, in all those months, I could not find my family, my real family. I'd been searching for them for a year, and there was absolutely no clue about it. I went through every corner of my dad's study. I asked relatives, I asked my siblings, but nobody knew where I was adopted from. At this point, I was ready to give up and just let it be. I was ready to accept the fact that I would never know my real parents, and I was stuck with my siblings that hated me for even existing. I was mentally ready to accept it, until somebody suggested I do a DNA test to find out my genetics and my real family. I felt like such an idiot for not realizing sooner that something like this existed, and that I did not need to work so hard for the entire year to just find where I was adopted from. At one point, I was convinced that somebody had just dropped me in front of my parents' door and they decided to keep me. It would explain so much about why I could not find out about my bio parents. But guys, that was not the case. That was not the case at all. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Are you ready for this? Let me explain. So, I got the DNA test done a few weeks ago and I got my results. I opened them a few hours ago, but ever since then I've just been sitting here in shock. Well, initially I got it done months ago as well, but I did not think they were true and there must have been a mistake of some sort. So I got it done again. But this time, same results. Now, it was for sure. There was no mistake. I was the biological daughter of my parents, and my 3 siblings were adopted. Let me tell you how I figured out that my siblings were the ones adopted. After I got the results the first time, I went back to the adoption center to find the connection my parents had with it, if it weren't through me. That's how I found out that all 3 of my siblings were adopted from that place. Yes, you read that right. I wasn't the one who was adopted. The years of torture and bullying that I went through were all for nothing because I wasn't the outsider of the family, they were. I'm not sure why my parents twisted the narrative around though, but whatever the reasoning may have been, it had made my life hell for all those years. When the first test came back, I spent more than a week trying to find out the reason for this deception. They would not have done this for no reason, but now that they weren't here with us, I could not find out the reason. Since there was no explanation, I was a bit hesitant to accept the results, and this is why I sent my DNA for the second testing. Right now, I'm just sitting in shock because I can't believe this is happening. The anger that's rising inside of me is insane because I went through so much all these years, only to find out that the ones who, well, should have been bullied were my siblings and not me. They ruined my life for no reason, and they were going to pay for it. However, I needed a proper plan for it. I wanted them to feel the helpless of their life going downhill as you try gluing the pieces back together only for them to fall back down again. I know the perfect way to do it. Final update. My revenge plan was a success. Let me walk you through it. My siblings are in shock and trying to piece their life together so they don't lose control of it. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying every single second of it. This inner peace that it's giving me is incomparable to anything else because they're now going through the same feeling of helplessness that I went through all my life because of them. To give you guys a bit of context on my revenge, well, I took the most valuable things that they owed. all the ancestral properties of our family, basically everything since I was a little kid. I kept hearing about how my dad's family owned so many properties, and since he was an only child, all the properties went to him, and after grandfather died, this meant that after his death, all of them would go to us. Well, I knew my siblings would never want to give me the property, so I had to take it by force. I filed a court case right there against my siblings for taking over the property since they belonged to the biological child. There were several reasons why I was so confident about winning the case. Well, I'd say the first and most important one was that all of them had sent me a text telling me how I could not get any share of the property since they belonged to biological children and were in connection to their lineage and bloodline, not knowing that this would come back to bite them in the butt since they were not the biological child I was, which meant that I had the right to take full control over everything. The second thing was that they were forced to get DNA testing. After I gave the proof of adoption by providing them with the documents, they were also forced to get a test done just to ensure that the documents were indeed correct. Of course, the results came out in my favor and they weren't biologically related at all to my parents. Third, ever since I found out about this entire situation, I contacted my grandmother and told her about the results and what I found out. Of course, I wasn't really close to her, but even though she failed to protect me from my siblings when we were young, she did not mean to intentionally harm me either. However, after hearing everything that my siblings have put me through and the results of the DNA test, she agreed to be a witness in my court case. She was the one who announced that these properties were part of the bloodline, and it was a tradition to only give them to the bio-child. All of this evidence and acts combined together made my case really strong. That's how I won. The shock of my siblings' faces is something that I'm not going to forget any time soon. It was so satisfactory to see them go through the same thing that I did, but not just that. The only thing they were most excited to take control over was now mine, and there's nothing that they could do about it. It's exactly like Mom once said. Karma really runs around in a circle.
I'll just be honest with you guys. Besides the fact of arguing about being biologically related or not, I mean, you would think that after all these years of being forced to live in the same household, after all these years of attending the same school, possibly hanging out with the same friend group, you would think eventually these siblings would learn, hey, maybe OP isn't really as big of a threat that we think she is. There's no reason for us to be jealous about this. But I do want to know your thought on this story because OP had a tough time growing up, and it was no thanks to OP's siblings. Guys, thank you for joining me on today's video. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories like this every single day, and you never know what type of story we're going to get. So if you like those type of dramas, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care, and remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.